we are all united in the fact that North Korea will not be accepted as a nuclear power. The rhetoric that we're hearing from North Korea is simply unacceptable by any standard. The United States will, if needed, defend our allies and defend ourselves.
That was U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry speaking in South Korea a short time ago. Tensions remain high on the Korean Peninsula as a new U.S. intelligence assessment about North Korea's nuclear capabilities adds to worries. Good morning and welcome to the News Hub. I'm Rolf Winkler. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency has concluded that the reclusive nation may have developed a nuclear device small enough to mount on a ballistic missile. Asia expert and managing director of Silvercrest Asset Management, Patrick Chovanec, joins us now. Good morning. Thanks so much for coming in. We also have Alastair Gale in Seoul. Alastair, thanks so much.
Morning.
Okay, I want to start with you, Patrick. First off, the new assessment. How capable are the North Koreans in terms of delivering a nuclear device?
The answer is we don't know. One estimate from the DIA is that they're moderately confident that they have a nuclear capability that is not necessarily reliable. Now that's one estimate, and remember the DIA got it wrong about Iraq having nuclear weapons. So I don't say that to disparage them, but just there's a lot of uncertainty.
Okay. Alastair, have the U.S. comments changed the mood in South Korea? They've been fairly stoic as usual there. Has it changed at all?
No, it hasn't really. I mean, this of course would be a concern to people in South Korea, but the South Korean Defense Ministry has said this morning that it didn't think that the North had this ability. And you talk to people here in Seoul, and the concern is really, that the North could flatten Seoul, much of South Korea, with conventional weapons. So whether or not they can put a nuclear device onto a warhead is a concern, but it's not as much of a concern here in South Korea.
Patrick, so this seems, again, more of the same, a lot of bluster, maybe an attempt at either extortion for foreign aid or just to demonstrate that Kim Jong-un is in control. But you've argued that the danger is that he could miscalculate. What do you mean?
Well, look, there have been a number of provocations, some pretty serious provocations from the North Koreans over the past few years, shelling a South Korean island, sinking a South Korean naval vessel, and it may have become unclear to them exactly where the red lines are. And I think part of the
unclear to Kim Jong-un.
To Kim Jong-un, and he's a young and inexperienced leader, and this has been a strategy that's worked for the North Koreans for some time. Creating a lot of threats and then extort, but both it shores up the internal support and it also extorts food and fuel aid from the rest of the world. But the danger is that they may inadvertently cross a red line.
One wild card I'm always curious about is China, and that is to say, why doesn't the U.S. threaten to arm Japan or South Korea? Say, you know what, they need to defend themselves. We're going to give them nukes. The Chinese, of course, wouldn't want that. They want to have as much power as possible. How would they react?
Well, the U.S. doesn't really want a nuclear Japan either. But it does go to the point that in the case that I've made many times to the Chinese, is that look, a belligerent North Korea actually creates reactions in the region that are negative for China. And so, China's been very reluctant to take a hard line on North Korea. They're very afraid of what would happen if there was instability there. But there's also a cost if they do nothing.
And what would that be?
That you have the United States taking a much more active role, deploying missile defenses, conducting military exercises in the Bohai Sea, the prospect of a Japan that is rearming, and also pushing South Korea and Japan even further into the embrace of the United States in terms of security arrangements. Those are things that China doesn't want to see, and it's important for them to realize that the more threats that come out of North Korea, the more that's likely to happen.
Yeah, and if you had a breakdown of the North Korean government, you might get a flood of refugees across the border into China. Alastair, I want to come back to you for a second. One interesting comment that John Kerry received on his trip to Asia from Japan, from South Korea, is they're worried about the U.S. financial situation, our ability to protect them, correct?
Well, yes, they are. I mean, of course, the South Koreans depend a lot on the, the deterrent effect from the, the U.S. military, and we saw that recently with the, the publicized flyovers here of the B-2 bomber and the B-52s and the F-22s, and that's important to the South Koreans that the message is sent to the North that the U.S. has their back. So I think if there was any sense that the financial situation meant that this would be weakened in any way, that would be a concern here in South Korea.
Is there, Patrick, I want to come back to you. Is there any prospect that the U.S. fiscal situation could deteriorate in such a way that we would have to pull back on our commitments, our defensive capabilities in Asia?
Well, there's been this whole pivot to Asia that has been a big element of U.S. foreign policy over the past year or so. And there have been some questions raised by U.S. allies in the region about whether the United States is willing to back that up with money. And it remains to be seen. But I do think that the U.S. has real commitments to the region, and I expect that it would back them up.
Okay. Patrick Chovanec, thanks so much for joining us. Alastair Gale in Seoul, thank you so much.